Welcome to the a16z podcast. I'm here with Benedict Evans, who's just fought traffic to get back down here to the home office from WWDC.
Well, what would Drew Code, as it's now known as.
And we are also joined by Dave Jagoda, who's on our technical talent team, and we will be leaning on his technical talent for part of this discussion. So, right. Benedict, let's start with you. You were just up there in Moscone Center in the Scrum, and you've gone to plenty of these events, and you have a way of sort of mapping them out. Explain that to us, and then let's just jump into it.
So I tend to think about these kinds of events as splitting into three categories. So first of all, there's the stuff that is a nice incremental improvement if you're used to the platform, like something cool happens in the calendar, something cool happens in the way the browser works or something. And that's great. That just kind of happens as the kind of the general evolution of the product.
Right.
And there's a bunch of stuff in the iOS, and there'll be a bunch of stuff at Google I/O in a couple of weeks. I think there's two more categories. One is stuff that's kind of consumer-facing features that you can go out and build marketing campaigns around, sort of tentpole features. And the other are fundamental strategic moves by the platform owner. And sometimes those are the same thing, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're kind of distinct. And so looking at what Apple announced, I think there's a bunch of things that sort of fit into some or both of those categories. So and some of them are sort of in the first one. So they did a major revamp of the Photos app so that now all of your photos are stored in the cloud. You don't even have to think about storage on your phone.
Right.
So you could call that one or you could call that two. They might market it, they might not. More interesting from a kind of industry point of view is that both the wearable story and the home Internet of Things story turned out to be true. So Apple is using Bluetooth LE and its local discovery stack and a sort of a central API story to store all the stuff from your health-related wearables in a central data store that any app on your phone can access with permission, and that any app on the phone therefore has an incentive to provide data into as permission.
So, and today they announced just specifically on the health side and also on the home
So
side.
Health Kit, yes, both for health and for home. So there's a stack a set of stuff for wearable health things, where you have an app on your phone that collects all the data from all the different wearable health things that you have, and that then provides that as a sort of an accessible data store to a Nike app or any other app that might want to use those. And secondly, they've done something similar, although we haven't seen so much detail, around managing internet connected devices in your home. So the lock, the garage door opener, the thermostat, and they put up a big slide with a list of 30 different companies' logos, except, of course, for Nest and Google.
Right.
And so those are both... they're both a symptom of what I've talked about before, which is that you see Apple, because it controls the whole widget, moving down the stack and leveraging Bluetooth LE in particular, but leveraging the fact that it knows exactly what's on the device and exactly how it's going to work so that stuff can actually be done in a predictable way. The other thing that they've done in that line, incidentally, is add an API to the fingerprint scanner. And they gave a number that I think it was 83% of all iPhone 5S users use a fingerprint scanner. And so they're now going to have a kind of a secure API. So any app on your phone can ask the question, "Is this Michael? Yes, no," and get a response,
right.
Which could be used for banks, could be used for anything.
Right.
It's just as an alternative to entering your password.
To even opening my door at home, right?
Yeah, potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Now, it's not, interestingly, an identity platform because a third-party app can't use that data to see that you're Michael.
Oh, so it doesn't see my actual fingerprint?
No, it doesn't see your fingerprint. It doesn't know that you're Michael. All it does is sort of ask, can you please verify that this fingerprint relates to this login, yes or no? So it's not as though you could get a new phone, install an entirely new social app, scan your fingerprint in, and therefore get your profile ID. Because the third party doesn't get that information. They just get a yes/no response from the API.
Got it.
It's like it's like iTunes. The app doesn't get an app doesn't get your iTunes password. It just gets the iTunes store saying yes, you're allowed to do that.
I see.
So there's those things which are sort of user-facing and you can see resulting in a whole bunch of interesting innovation. And then there's two other things. One of them is what they call extensions, which is a way for third-party apps to hook themselves much more deeply into the system, much more controlled than on Android. And so there's an obvious response, which, well, Android's always had that. And the answer was, well, Android never tried to stop people from doing that, which is there's a sort of swings and roundabouts point here. So Apple has given a bunch of quite controlled ways that a third-party app can offer services within the system. So you can send a photo to any app now you can send, and any app also can add itself to a menu to provide services. So the example they give is you're on a web page, you press the services button, and then you've got Bing Translate there as an option. So instead of you having to then open the Bing app and then load the page into it, or open the Google app and load the page into it. And so the funny thing here is, of course, this is basically giving Google and Facebook a whole list of ways to get their hooks deeper into iOS.
I was going to say, so this is a good thing for Google and Facebook?
Well, this is, there is going to be a share this photo to Facebook button and a share this photo to Instagram button and a, send this link via WhatsApp button and a whole bunch of other things that, of course, are very tightly under the user's control in a way that they aren't necessarily on Android. Right. But are there. And what Apple is also doing is they're allowing third-party widgets onto the home screen, and they're allowing a few other bits and pieces. So, for example, there's a story around photo editing. So third-party apps can pull. A photo app can invoke another photo app in order to edit. And so, again, it's a bit like multitasking, that Apple is doing something that was on Android like 3 years earlier. And they're trying to do it without that, or picking a different set of trade-offs. So it's more controlled. But then you don't have the security implications or the battery implications.
And Dave, chime in here too, but Apple is famous for having that control, and their argument for a long time had been that, like, without that control, we couldn't make the experience as, wonderful as we'd like it to be at Apple. How is it that do you sort of describe this a little bit as a loosening of that control, and why are they able to do it and still have the experience that they want?
It seems like some of the things that Benedict was talking about, I think there probably are share buttons for already, so they're already sort of cooperating or facilitating potential competitors to do stuff. So this just opens it up to other ones, unforeseen competitors. So,
I think there's a couple of bits here. I think one of my impressions from the event was that Apple has had, any company that isn't doing something you think they should do, it's either they've decided not to do it, or they haven't got the resource to do it, or it's on the roadmap, but it's not ready yet. Right. And it feels like what happened to Apple today was there were like 5 or 6 major projects all hit the end of their waterfall today. Yeah. So there was a whole set of questions around what does the sharing and the passing of information between apps look like, and that wasn't finished last year.
Right.
And you can sort of see, looking at iOS 7, there's like placeholders for this stuff that wouldn't be there if they hadn't been planning to do this. And, an API for the fingerprint scanner. Well, they only launched a fingerprint scanner last year, and they wanted to make sure they were getting it right. So a bunch of this is just timing. I would suspect, and this is kind of more Dave's area than me, that a bunch of this is also kind of Moore's Law.
Right.
That, the more CPU you've got, the more things you can put inside of Sandbox instead of letting them run on bare metal.
Right.
And so quite a lot of it may be to do with that they just feel like they can control it and have a good experience. Whereas, if you wanted it to happen at all 5 years ago, you'd have to have had it completely uncontrolled.
Yeah, and which is sort of the Android experience, right? You just go at it and let's see how it works.
Yeah.
And then obviously the final thing is the new programming language called Swift. And I think John Gruber said on Twitter during the event that basically a third of the room was going completely quiet, saying, I have absolutely no idea what these people are talking about, which is the category I was in. New programming language.
And the other 2/3 of the room are going berserk.
Yeah,
right?
and the other 2/3 of the room are going, wow.
We were joking about curly braces, and Dave, this is where we need your help. Swift, as it was described, is Objective-C without the objective, or without the C, I can't remember which, but right. Tell us and granted, they just announced it today, and it was a surprise to everyone, what it starts to look like and how we see it rolling out.
Sure. I've only been looking at it for a little while. I see that, to me, it seems like they've tried to take the very interesting features from other languages and incorporate them into Apple's development environment. So I just looking through the documents looked at before, there's features of Python, Ruby, CoffeeScript, JavaScript, Go, and even hints of languages like Java and Lisp that they've incorporated into it, which is sort of amazing to have touched so many different interesting features. We talked about, you guys like teasing about curly braces. Another one also maybe in the punctuation category would be semicolons. Traditionally Objective-C has to have semicolon at the end of every line. Swift doesn't seem to have that. Again, you might say, who cares? But programmers argue about this stuff to no end. So it's interesting they've added that in. Another, I think, really interesting productivity feature. This is clearly definitely in Benedict's third category of fundamental sort of things, is the so-called REPL, or read, evaluate, print loop, which is really important when you're developing code. Instead of having to make your change, compile it, build it, copy it over, see did that work or not. You can just see what's the effect immediately as you're doing, which helps trim that development cycle.
So the example in the keynote was he was building a game and there was a blimp, and you could actually see the changes you were making to the app and to the blimp as you were doing it.
Exactly. And this is the thing that people, that love languages like Python or Ruby love to have. They just get to see it as they're building it. And also it's useful to try something out without changing things around too much. So the one other observation I had about it was it looks very much to me as if this was built, it's a programming language that was built by programmers, obviously, but for programmers. I think sometimes people try to think, what could we do for our users that would, we sort of know best what our users want. Let's build that for them. But it felt to me at least like they're building this for themselves as well to help Apple's own efforts, as opposed to like, here's a kit, you go use this. We'll use the real stuff. You guys can use this sort of dumbed down, limited thing, and it doesn't feel like that at all.
They're doing their own dog food.
Exactly, totally. Yeah, this is pretty exciting. I mean, I know you guys are clearly think I'm in that second two-thirds camp, but it's pretty exciting.
To your point, Benedict, the strategic point of it is why? Like, what does this do for developers?
So they already had their own programming development language already. I mean, there was a chart that I was looking at where they've got a 2x2 matrix of developer productivity versus app performance. And so you've got Ruby and Python and JavaScript and so on with high productivity and low performance,
right? And
obviously C and Objective-C and so on in the other corner of high performance and no productivity. And they're claiming that this is in the top right.
Yep.
That's to say you've got both the productivity and the performance.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. I think another thing too is people do, developers have preferences, of course, about what they're writing in. So by trying to acknowledge the really good, nice developer features that exist in these other languages, by incorporating those, I think it helps win people over.
So is this something that is going to be constrained in the Apple world? Does it just makes it easier than ever for folks to write apps for iOS or OS X? But are we going to start to see it outside the Apple world, do you think?
You asked me a question earlier, and even I've had time to think about it. I don't know. It seems like this is very dependent on Apple's system, so I don't know if they could easily take it outside the world, or even if they'd want to. But it would certainly would appeal to me if they could let us use this environment for other things other than OS X and iOS.
And one suspicion is that once people really pick over it, there'll be a bunch of things around how this fits into Apple's sort of 10, 15-year roadmap of, because Objective-C has been around, 15 years?
Probably more than that, yeah. And
so there may be a bunch of sort of things that it lets them do that they couldn't do before.
Right. Yep.
I mean, the other interesting developer story is iCloud Drive. I mean, we've all heard the story of Steve Jobs meeting Drew Houston and saying that's not a product, that's a feature. And now Apple, after going through a period where they wanted to get away from the file system, it's kind of ironic because Apple basically invented the idea of having like a visible, tangible file system where you touch things and move files around. And then the last couple of years they've tried to get away with that, and iOS obviously didn't have a file system at all because that was going to be much simpler and much easier for people to understand. And up to a point it was, but we all sort of end up, you either use Dropbox or, you start putting PDFs into programs that aren't into one file and Word documents into another program. And, and you think, well, it's kind of nice to have just a place where I could just put stuff like that PDF and those photos and that Word document and that spreadsheet and that thing that I need to have. And now they've done it. So now you have iCloud Drive, and it works. Well, I hate to say it works like Dropbox. It's a folder you put stuff in, and it's on all of your devices. And as an extension to that, therefore, Apple is now sort of broken apart the file sandbox a bit because it now means that apps can access documents created in other apps, which is the way it works on computers, as opposed on desktop computers, as opposed to the way it works on as traditionally worked on iOS. So it feels like Apple are kind of backing off a little bit from the absolutism of there should not be a user-accessible file system at all.
Right. Well, and what does that say about sort of Mac and OS X versus the iOS world? I mean, how are the sort of relative importance of those things, being described in what was announced today?
Well, we haven't talked about Mac OS at all yet, actually. And,
maybe that's one clue, right?
And, Apple spent the first hour talking about Mac OS, and from the kind of the broader technology industry, they've said they've got 80 million an install base of 80 million, of which 40 million are on Mavericks, and that's like a higher percentage than Windows 8. But there's a lot more Windows 8 devices out there than there are Macs, because there's something like 1.5 billion Windows PCs out there.
Right.
So for Apple the Mac matters, and for developers the Mac matters, but for us, because we all use Macs, the Mac matters. But in the great wide world of the enormous transformation of the technology industry and the media industry and the whole of industry in general by mobile, the Mac is kind of irrelevant. So, yes, there's a bunch of nice stuff in there, and they've basically revised Mac OS to clean up all the kind of cruft that had accrued over the last 10, 15 years in much the same way that they did with iOS last year, with iOS 7. And, they've tidied and they've cleaned and they've systematized and they've made it all kind of make sense again. And they've done a couple of really nice things like, you can now use AirDrop to send files wirelessly from your phone to your Mac, or vice versa. And the cunning thing is, and this is maybe also a strategic move, is they have this thing called convergence, where if you have an app on your phone, if you have a web page open on your Mac or an iWork document open on your Mac, you have a little icon on your phone and your iPad that relates to that. So you tap on that icon on your iPad, and your iPad will open up with that same web page or that same document. And I mean, the really tangible use case is you can highlight a phone number on a web page and select dial, and your phone will dial it. And we've all been in that room where you're looking at the phone number on the web page and dialing it with your hand, and kind of going 415-83, and they solve that. You also can use your phone, your Mac as to dial the phone number, to receive a call, or to use it as a speakerphone, get caller ID. You can send not just iMessage but SMS from your Mac over your phone. So you're basically turning these things into devices that all work together and kind of understand that they're in the same room and made by the same company, which is the sort of thing that it's one of those things that feels like it should have done that 15 years ago. The point is, for Apple, for all of this stuff, it's about driving the devices.
Right.
And you're coming back to the point I made earlier about Apple are giving Google and Facebook all sorts of hooks into their platform. Well, that's fine, but they're doing it on a $600 device that people have to buy.
Right. So you've said this before, that Apple is a hardware company. Like, their business is not as complicated as people think. And how does this help them as a hardware company, what you saw today?
So let me give you a specific answer and a general answer. I think the specific answer is that Apple is using cloud and, to some extent, Bluetooth LE to make rich native apps do stuff that you feel like they ought to have been doing forever. So you take a photo on your iPhone, it's on your Mac, it's on your iPad. You edit it, it's on your Mac, it's on your iPad. You change an address, you add a phone number. Anything that you doing on one device is on the other device.
Right.
And it's all being done through the cloud, but they don't talk about the cloud. So it's like it's sort of the mirror image of Google, where the cloud, for Google, it's like Mark Andreessen's old phrase about Windows becoming a set of badly debugged device drivers. And for Google, any physical object, in a sense, is like a set of imperfect device drivers that you have to go through to get to the pure glory of the cloud.
Right.
Whereas for Apple, it's completely the other way. And also for Apple, the device hardware should disappear, which is the ideal of the Chromebook. The hardware and the software should just disappear, and it should all be in the cloud. And for Apple, it's completely the other way around. So why the hell should you have to know that it's sitting on a server in rural Oregon or something? It should just take the photo, and the photo should just be there. And you shouldn't have to worry about you've taken 35 gig of photos and you've only got a 16 gig phone. The phone, they're just there. You don't have to think, okay, they're being stored on my Google Plus account or my iCloud account. It's just there, and that's a very different approach to Google.
This is reminding me a little bit of Sun, which I would say was also a hardware company, where they realized Java might help their hardware business along, but it feels like they didn't take it far enough. Too much of it was left to the developer, left to people to figure out how to take advantage of the hardware. And I think Apple's shown you can have good hardware. I would agree they are a hardware company. And hey, look, it looks great together. You don't need to worry about all those gory details. It'll basically work. So I think that's smart. That helps cement their hardware position.
I think. To the broader point here is Apple's kind of got a lock on the high end of the phone business. They sell phones at an average of $600 in an industry that averages about $180, and Android averages about $250. And in the high end space, they have, as it might be, 2/3 to 3/4 of the market, and Samsung has most of the rest.
Right.
And a certain number of people switch every year, and rather more switch from Android to iPhone than switch back. So there's kind of a ratchet effect going on there that Apple is slowly gaining share in that space. And in the US, they've got half the market because the subsidy environment means that there's no cheap Androids. That even the iPhone 4S is basically free in the US market. So they've got that lock on that high-end market. And what all of this stuff does collectively is, as every kind of is the kind of the same as what happens with an iPhone release is, once a year, Apple jumped forward and set a new bar, And for the next 6 to 9 months, Android and the Android OEMs catch up. And then for the next 3 to 6 months, they're ahead.
Right.
And then Apple jumps forward again. So there's this kind of zigzag. You know, there's a period of 3 to 6 months where the best phone in the market is not an iPhone. Right. And Android does a load of cool stuff that Apple doesn't do. And then it flips back again. But what this doesn't do is change that dynamic. You know, Apple continues to make the best hardware, amongst the best hardware in the market, and one of the 2 best operating systems on the market, depending on your personal taste and your personal preferences,
right.
and what priorities you have. But they make it at $600. And there's a very large number of people in the world who like a smartphone and actually quite like to do apps and aren't spending $600 on a phone. Now, in the US, the only people buying the great majority of it, let me phrase it slightly differently. In the US, because the price premium is so small, most of the people who aren't choosing iPhone are doing it because they don't terribly care very much.
Right.
In the rest of the world, there's an awful lot of people who care quite a lot and can't afford an iPhone. And the only thing that really changes that dynamic is a phone at a low price. It's a phone at, for the sake of argument, $300. At which point you can go out and buy a really, really nice product with really good build quality and a really good screen, nice performance. It's just not a $600 phone. You know, you're buying a Ford and not a BMW. And you know, nobody sits in a Ford and says, "Gee, this is a crappy car." It's just not a BMW.
Right.
And that's the kind of the driving dynamic of the phone business for the last 2, 3, 4 years. There's a certain number of people who buy premium products, and there's a certain number of people who don't. And amongst the people who buy premium products, all this stuff that Apple does drives their purchase decision. And you know, as it might be, 2/3 to 3/4 of them prefer the choices that Apple makes to the choices that Google makes and the choices that Samsung make. But there's a whole other conversation going on out there that Apple is not really engaging with yet. And so I think that's the kind of the super high level point, that Apple is just kind of maintaining the status quo. They're not actually changing the conversation.
Well, the rest of the conversation will be happening pretty soon with Google's version of WWDC.
It will.
I/O.
Yeah, I mean, and that comes back to my point that as Apple pushes stuff down into the hardware and the integration and the 64-bit chip and the fingerprint scanner, and you know, almost, how can I put it? There's a thing I said in another context that a lot of what's going on now is creating dumb glass. Mm-hmm. So a TV is dumb glass, or the display in a car is dumb glass, and the smart lives somewhere else. But another part of it is turning the cloud into dumb cloud, or dumb storage. Uh-huh. You know, so what Google is doing is they say, well, the device is dumb glass, and all the cool stuff's happening in the cloud. And what Apple is doing is saying, no, the cloud is just dumb storage. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, there's a bit more to it than that. But you know, basically, the cloud is storage. You don't have to think about that. You've got this fantastic device that does all these wonderful things.
Clearly, there's 2 worlds that want it, you know, dumb storage, and those that want, you know, just beautiful devices, and then there's the Android fans. So we'll get that side of the story at I/O, and I know, Benedict, you're going to be there, and Dave will bring you back. But I want to thank both of you for breaking down WWDC, and that's the A16Z podcast.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.